All right, and welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Wrestling with Fans podcast. We are a pro wrestling podcast created by fans for fans from a fan's perspective. My name is Kyle, and this is episode 122. Retribution is DOA. That is the theme of this week's episode. We're going to talk about Monday Night Raw from this week's episode. We're going to talk about the debut, the official in-ring debut of Retribution, and what my thoughts have been about that show. It's wasn't very good. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be upfront. I did not like Raw at all. So let's talk about Monday Night Raw from last night. Let's talk about Monday Night Raw, guys. And as I said at the top of the show, it sucked. We're going to run down a lot of the major events from last night, from Monday night, if you're listening to the audio version. I'm not going to hit every single topic because I don't think it is necessary, but we're going to hit on all of the Retribution stuff from last night. We kick off Raw with the Then, Now, and Forever video, and it is being messed up. It's got the little fast forward rewind stuff going on. Then we are welcomed to the Thunderdome with Retribution on their way to the ring, coming in from where the crowd would normally be, from behind the commentator's table. And genius Tom Phillips says here, this group of wanton vandals known as Retribution have officially become part of WWE and signed a contract. They can do anything, anytime, to anybody. Now we're going to break down each of these segments as I go along here, just so we know what's going on. Hey, so we get this group of wanton vandals. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you had to Google what that is. I did as well. Nobody talks like that, Tom Phillips. Nobody talks like that, okay? So let's break down this within the first 5 seconds of Raw. So we're brought in. We see the group of 5 who will soon be known as the core group of Retribution. The 5 core members. So you have a group of people who have actively been trying to disrupt and destroy WWE TV production and sets, the ring. They chainsawed a ring on SmackDown a while back, and now, because reasons, they have signed WWE contracts. They are now under WWE contract because that's what anybody wants to do when you have a group of people from the outside trying to disrupt your TV show and attack people backstage, attack security guards, destroy property. They threw a Molotov cocktail at a generator on their very first night of television. Now someone is actually offering them a WWE contract. So right off the jump, none of this shit makes sense. Okay? So then we get the 5 members in the ring and a female member who, if you don't watch NXT, it is Mia Yim, who does not have an official name as part of Retribution. She says, to WWE management, you think your company is safe because you gave us contracts. Think again. She follows up and says that her brothers and sisters are done being stepped on so they can get some imaginary brass ring. It's all about that imaginary brass ring that Vince McMahon I guess so eloquently talks about. If you watched AEW Dynamite last week, the debuting Miro, formerly known as Rusev, talked about that brass ring and telling basically Vince to shove it up his ass. So it's all about that brass ring. While she's talking, her mask did not fit. It kept falling down on her face, and I think 3 or 4 times she had to push it up so you could actually see her mouth. It's very obviously Mia Yim. Unless you've never watched NXT before or watched the Royal Rumble this past year, it is Mia Yim. So I don't know what kind of weird name they're going to get to. We'll get to the Retribution's names here in a little bit. But then a unnamed male member, the guy who's been doing most of the talking for Retribution in some of their promos, which is none other than former NXT star, I guess, Dominik Dijakovic. And we'll get to what his name is later when we get to the main event of Raw, because I'll go off on a tangent if we go. He says they are there to destroy the WWE and rebuild it in the image of Retribution, and they will do it. They will do it by draining the lifeblood of the company. He blamed them for being the sickness that is responsible for the infestation of this hellhole. He said all the other established wrestlers do it for the fame and fortune so they can collect their paydays like whores. He said they will make them pay for their sins because they are the judge, jury, and executioner. So let's pause again right here for just a minute. Okay. Let's talk about the look of these guys real quick. Dominik Dijakovic now has a shaved head and a Bane mask. Not so much like the comics, but more like Dark Knight Rises Bane mask going on, with some red eye paint over his eyes that goes straight up over his head. So he's looking like a poor man's character from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Okay, now the other guys all have similar masks, except for one, who does have a hockey style, a classic goalie mask from hockey, making him kind of look like Jason Voorhees with a little bit slightly different paint on it there. So the look of these men and women is just kind of ridiculous already. They initially went from, all black pants, shoes, black hoodie with the hood up, and black face coverings, giving off a very Antifa-like vibe, which is fine. I mean, that's kind of how it started, attacking and rioting in the backstage area each week on Raw and occasionally on SmackDown. So it kind of fit. They were going for that climate at the time when they first appeared on Raw. The protests and the riots across the country was a hot button topic of the moment. So that's how they had them dress. Now that they have removed their hoods, they look like a bunch of clowns. Okay? If you've seen it, you understand what I'm saying. The other thing is here is Dijak makes the comment, all the other wrestlers do it for the fame and fortune so they can collect their paychecks like whores. So now that Retribution is under WWE contract, we can fairly easily assume that they are also receiving a paycheck from WWE, so therefore they are whores as well. So I'm not sure who's writing this shit, okay, but we're only like 2 or 3 minutes into Raw, and I'm already just kind of like done and over these guys already. But we keep going here because the Hurt Business music hits. They make their way out to confront Retribution. Tom Phillips, the genius that he is, reminds us that the Hurt Business has offered their services to WWE to stand up to Retribution, which, again, Retribution is obviously being portrayed as heels here. But the Hurt Business, who are also heels to everybody else in WWE, are all of a sudden baby faces when it comes to Retribution, and this is especially weird considering that Cedric Alexander just turned heel a couple weeks ago. So you have babyface Cedric Alexander turning heel, joining the Hurt Business. Now he is going to come across as a babyface because he's standing up to Retribution. So we're already kind of crossing things here. You can kind of see where this is going, and again, we're only just a couple minutes into Monday Night Raw. We get a promo cut by MVP, and Lashley has a few words. They come into the ring, run off the 5 core members of Retribution, only for the ring to be surrounded by many, many more members. The Retribution guys and gals attack the Hurt Business. We get a double choke slam from Dominik Dijakovic and Dio Madden, the black gentleman in Retribution, onto, I believe it was Bobby Lashley, and then all of a sudden we go to a commercial. And the only thing I guess I'll say is it's kind of fitting that these guys have this Mad Max look because WWE is now emanating from the Thunderdome So I'm guessing Vince McMahon must have a hard-on for Mad Max Thunderdome kind of shit right now, and this is where he's going. We'll get to the names still here in a little bit. Come back from the commercial. Genius Tom Phillips once again reminds us that the 5 core members, this is the first time they're referred to as the 5 core members of Retribution, have WWE contracts. But that begs the question, what about the other dozen or so people that have been helping them out and attacking other superstars? Are they going to remain nameless and hooded drones, or are we going to get more reveals later on? I'm not really sure, but again, we're about 6-7 minutes into Raw, and we're already at a full-blown train wreck here, guys. Absolutely ridiculous. We get a little interview backstage with Rey Mysterio. We're not going to talk about that. But then let's talk about the triple threat match to determine the number 1 contender for the Raw Tag Team Champions. You got Seth Rollins and Don't Call Me Buddy Murphy taking on the team of Dominic Mysterio and Humberto Carrillo, and also Andrade and Angel Garza. Andrade and Angel Garza pick up the win in about 5 minutes. Seth Rollins walked out on Buddy Murphy, allowing Garza to hit his finish to pick up the win. Now, oddly enough about this, you had the Street Profits come out. They were in color commentary, so they had their full entrance with all the cups and everything. Then we get the other 3 teams get their entrances, and then we take a commercial break. So you have all 6 guys standing around the ring for about 3 to 4 minutes during this break. They're all vying for a tag team title shot, so you'd think that maybe somebody would attack during the commercial. We come back in right into the action, but there's no crowd there, so why does it matter? And then, of course, with Angel Garza and Andrade winning, they will get a Raw Tag Team title shot at Clash of Champions. And just for the record, this will be the 8th match between the Street Profits and Andrade and Garza, whether it be tag or singles matches, since the middle of July. And this is 12 total matches if you go back to when Garza was teaming with Austin Theory as part. And all day after watching this, I've thought of just one thing. This is the feud that will not end. It really just will not end. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. So Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. So Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. So Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. But Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. But Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. But Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. So as you can tell, that's been running through my head for a long time after watching that, because it just seems like some of these feuds just won't fucking end. They won't move on. And I'm just going to go and say this now. For anybody watching live or anybody who listens to the audio after the fact, that will not be the first time you hear that song in this podcast. You're going to hear it a couple other times tonight as well, because there are some feuds that just will not fucking end. And we'll get to those here in just a few minutes. We get backstage, and their Retribution's talking about the Hurt Business deciding to bend at the knee of WWE instead of helping their cause. He said they used the WWE payoffs to purchase their $1,000 suits. He called them greedy and said they will have a match with them later and pay them in Retribution. So it's official. We are finally getting Retribution in the ring later tonight on Raw. A couple more things to add in here. He talks about using their payoffs to purchase their big suits, called them greedy. They just got contracts with WWE that apparently they can do anything to anyone at any time. Then we get KO show segments with that involves Shane McMahon, Dabba-Kato, and Braun Strowman. I'm not going to get into detail about that. If you want to check that out at your own time, you can do that. But apparently Braun is on Raw now because reasons, I guess. We go backstage again, and this time Retribution was beating up Titus O'Neil and Humberto Carrillo. And the unnamed male leader, who is Dominic Dijakovic, says that they are the judge, jury, and executioner. Thank you. You just told us about that a few minutes ago. And then let's get to another thing here. We have Keith Lee taking on Drew McIntyre, and this match ends, surprise fucking surprise, in another DQ. And just for the record, guys and gals, this is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. So Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. So Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. So Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people... Alright guys, I'll spare you a little bit on that one. We won't let it go on forever there. But Keith Lee and Drew McIntyre, it just... And the worst part is Drew and Keith aren't even in a technical feud together. But they keep having these matches. Now, this match ends in a DQ and Randy Orton comes out and gets involved, causing the DQ. This is the second week in a row where a Drew McIntyre and Keith Lee match has been interrupted by Randy Orton, causing a no contest or a DQ finish. And let's take a look at something here, guys. Let's take a look at something. Makes his Raw debut. He has his very first match against Randy Orton on August 24th, which Randy Orton wins via DQ. So Keith Lee is already 0-1. His first match loses via DQ. Okay. Then we get to the payback match. Keith Lee wins decisively in about 6 minutes via pinfall over Randy Orton. The next night on Raw is the qualifier for the triple threat match to determine the number one contender, which ultimately Randy Orton wins. But in the his qualifying match, Keith Lee beats Dolph Ziggler. Later that night on the 31st of August, he loses in that triple threat match when Randy Orton pinned Seth Rollins, not Keith Lee. He didn't take the pin, but he did lose the match. Then the following week, loses via DQ to Randy Orton because of Drew McIntyre. We get a no contest last week against Drew McIntyre, and another DQ finish this week on Raw. So in 7 matches, Keith Lee has 2 pinfall wins. He wasn't involved in a pinfall finish in the triple threat match. And then 3 DQs and a no contest. So, Keith Lee. who had all this pomp and circumstance. He was a double champion in NXT. He defeated Adam Cole, Bebe, for the NXT title to hold both the NXT North American and NXT Championship. He relinquishes the NXT North American Championship just so he can concentrate on the NXT Championship, which he quickly lost to Karrion Kross. Then was called up to Raw where we got here. And we know what's happened to Karrion Kross. He was injured in that match and had to relinquish the NXT title, which is now being held by Finn Balor. So Keith Lee, who was the big dog, figuratively and literally, I guess, in NXT, is now nothing more than a prop in the Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton feud. I don't know what the booking is thinking, what creative is thinking, what Vince is thinking. You know, Keith Lee had a huge moment at the Royal Rumble this year, squaring off against Brock and Braun. Looked very strong in the moment, even though he was eliminated. You know, he runs roughshod in NXT, culminates as a double champion, and now he's no more than a prop in the Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton feud leading into Clash of Champions. I know I'm not the only one who's thinking this, but I think it's a travesty to how Keith Lee has been treated on the main roster so far. I really hope that after this coming Sunday, which I think Clash of Champions is this Sunday, I'll have to double check, that they can put him in a proper feud and actually do something with him instead of having him be a prop. Okay? Then we get Randy Orton cuts a promo, which just happens to be next to an ambulance. A medical facility transport, which, by the way, has been sitting next to the entrance ramp the entire show so far because reasons. Well, I guess it had one reason, just so Randy Orton could cut a promo in front of it after he interfered in the match. So it did serve one purpose, I guess, but I digress. Here's another thing that kind of irritates me about Raw last night. You have Zelina Vega defeating Mickie James in about 3 minutes to earn herself a championship match at Clash of Champions against Asuka on the pre-show. Okay? Now, I'm not so mad that Zelina Vega is going to go against Asuka. I'm glad to see Zelina Vega actually getting in the ring and wrestling. But let's look at her track record recently, okay? In 2020, just 2020 so far, she has had 2 singles matches. Lost both of them. She's also lost 2 6-person tag team matches in 2020. She competed and lost in the 2020 Women's Royal Rumble match. The last match that your number one contender for the Raw Women's Championship, the last match she won, was on November 14th, 2019, almost a year ago, in a mixed tag match with Andrade, defeating the team of Sin Cara and Carolina. And we got to go back even further, a whole nother year further back, because the last singles victory that your number one contender for the Raw Women's Championship had was a pinfall win against Lana on SmackDown Live on August 7th, 2019, over a year ago. So Zelina Vega did absolutely nothing to be able to put herself in position to earn a title shot other than just getting in the face and talking shit to Asuka last week on Raw. This is an issue that WWE is having across the board. They just have these random people put in a match where the winner gets a title shot. There's no build. These people don't have to work their way up. I get with the whole global pandemic, the roster is thinned out. You know, Charlotte's out, Becky's out, Ronda's gone. You know, the 3 biggest women names you had. But you have so many other talented women, like Shayna Baszler, who is now in a tag team because they didn't know what to do with her in a singles run. So now you have to take someone who hasn't won a singles match in over a year, beats the woman who lost to the champ last week in a botched finish, to earn a title shot for the pre-show. WWE creative, WWE booking at its finest. Can't make this shit up. I looked on the Internet Wrestling Database to get those stats on Zelina Vega. They're all on there. Get backstage, got the Hurt Business beating up the Retribution drones, the nameless, faceless, hooded figures, and the announcers acts like it's some big deal because they beat up the Job Squad of Retribution. No one cares. We do get a 24/7 title segment at the beach. And normally I'm all about anything and everything R-Truth in the 24/7 title. But I think with where Raw had been up until this point, I just couldn't get into this. Some people are saying that it looks like the producers just wanted a day at the beach. It's pretty much why they went and did this segment. I may go back and watch it. I may change my mind. But in the heat of the moment, I just wasn't into it. And then we get to something else here. Get your singing hat on, because we're going to hear a song here in a minute. Because Apollo Crews defeats Cedric Alexander. Okay. Jen says, I call that match will end in a roll. I would not be surprised if that match ends in a roll, because that's what happens. Okay. So Apollo defeats Cedric Alexander. Let's go back to June 15th. 3 months ago. 3 months ago. Okay. This is the 13th match, 1-3, between Apollo Crews and a member of the Hurt Business since June 15th. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. So Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing where to go. So Vince will just keep booking it on every single show. This is the feud that will not end. It just goes on and on, my friend. Some people started writing it, not knowing
We'll talk
where
over
to
while that
go.
song's finished.
So Vince will just
13
keep
matches
on every
in 3
single
months.
show. This is the
It's
feud
ridiculous.
that will. Next, we get Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax, your women's tag team champions, defeating the team of Natalya and Lana in about a minute. After the match, Shayna and Nia go after Ruby Riott and Liv Morgan, who are on commentary. They get away only for Nia Jax to put Lana through a table, which has led some to speculate that this is punishment for Lana, whose husband, Miro, formerly known as Rusev, is now over on the competition on AEW, and he cut a pretty scathing promo on his debut. And it's led some to believe that this is punishment for Lana. You can kind of take that for what you will. So then we finally get to the main event of Monday Night Raw. Okay. It is a 6-man tag match featuring the Hurt Business, which will see Shelton Benjamin, Bobby Lashley, and in his second match of the night, Cedric Alexander, instead of, MVP, because he hadn't wrestled already, but Cedric has, but he's getting 2 matches tonight, taking on the team of Retribution. Now, obviously, the Hurt Business has been heels up until pretty much any time they interact with Retribution, so apparently they're baby faces now. And then we learn the names of the members of Retribution. We learn that Dominik Dijakovic, the artist formerly known as Dominik Dijakovic, is now known as T-Bar. Let that sink in for a minute. He is now known as T-Bar. Dio Madden, the African-American fellow in the group, who some of you may remember had a brief stint on commentary on Raw about a year ago. And I only bring that up now because it's going to come into play here in a few minutes as I go through this, okay? Dio Madden is now known as Mace. Okay, that's not a horrible name. Not an absolutely horrible name. And then we have the other gentleman, who, the one wearing the Jason Voorhees-esque mask, who, for those of you unaware, is Shane Thorne from NXT, from the formerly of the tag team TM61. He also had a brief stint on Raw back in the spring. But again, I'll bring that up now so I can touch on it here in a little bit. The creative forces that be have given him the name Slapjack. So the three members of Retribution in this match, the three male members are T-Bar, Mace, and Slapjack. Guys, I'm not making this up. Jen, I believe Mace is like M-A-C-E, like the weapon Mace. Mace is by far the best name of the three. Mace is also a operator in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019, so it kind of fits there. But, we don't know what the two women's names are, which, for those of you unaware, I spoke earlier, Mia Yim with the blue hair. The other female is Mercedes Martinez, also formerly of NXT. But again, I'll bring that up because we're going to touch on it here in a little bit. This is all going to make sense at the end, guys, because I'm going to book how WWE should have brought Retribution in, and I've got the perfect way to do it. Okay, but we'll get there because still got a few things to cover here. One thing I want to say off the jump: the match itself was absolutely ridiculous. It ended in a DQ, but I'll get there. The guys in Retribution pretty much looked gassed within the first 2 to 3 minutes. Dio Madden, a.k.a. Mace, even looked visibly lost and confused as to where he was supposed to be, what he was supposed to be doing. I mean, it's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I have read other places where they feel they kind of noticed it too, where he kind of looked like he wasn't exactly sure what was going on. Let's get to the finish here, though. Bobby Lashley puts Slapjack. Yes, his name is Slapjack. Lashley puts Slapjack in the Hurt Lock, which is his version of the full Nelson. T-Bar on the outside of the ring runs over and pokes Lashley in the eye to break up the Hurt Lock, and then the referee calls for the bell. So you mean to tell me that all of the tag matches where someone comes in and breaks up a pinfall, they let that go? But in this instance, something similar happens. One of his teammates is in a submission move, so he comes in to try to make the save, and then the ref calls for the bell. So officially, Retribution has lost their very first match within WWE by disqualification. So I've already talked about some of the hypocrisy in their promos throughout the night. I've talked about the ridiculous masks. I've talked about their ridiculous names. And now they're losing their first match. But wait, there's more. Because you have all of the nameless members of Retribution run down to ringside and start attacking the Hurt Business, only for Drew McIntyre to lead the rest of the Raw roster out to make the save, where the Raw roster completely beats down Retribution. The 5 core members of Retribution just disappear out of nowhere. And then we get the ending of Raw, to which Randy Orton comes in and hits an RKO from out of nowhere, obviously, onto Drew McIntyre to end the show. So you build Monday Night Raw all night. Jen, it is some of the dumbest shit ever. I'm not making this up. Anybody who doesn't believe me or doesn't agree with my opinion, feel free to send off. This is just my opinion, guys. I'm a fan like y'all. And it was some shit. So you build Raw up all night around Retribution and the Hurt Business, only for the match to end in a bullshit DQ. and then only for it to end in this massive brawl as a backdrop to the go-home angle for your WWE Championship match. I'm all about Drew and Randy having a big go-home angle leading into Clash of Champions, which is this Sunday. So I'll talk about that later on too. But you built so much around Retribution and the Hurt Business that now it's kind of secondary to Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton. Retribution is officially dead on arrival after one night. Exactly. So you're the biggest heel base that you're pushing hardcore, you have them lose. Yes, WWE booking logic at its finest. Okay? But wait, there's more. There's more. No, I think that might actually be it. No, but seriously though, Retribution, I was interested when they first showed up, when they kind of had this Antifa vibe to them. I was curious where WWE was going to take them. They've kind of stayed with this Antifa-like vibe for the last several weeks. They unmasked themselves now to be Jason Voorhees and the reject crew from Mad Max with ridiculous names, now being the thing that they say they hate, a WWE superstar, to collecting a paycheck now that they're under contract, because we were reminded several times that they were under contract. We were also reminded several times by Tom Phillips that Retribution can do anything to anyone at any time, but apparently that doesn't apply to poking somebody in the eye during a match. So they basically set all this stuff up, and it was a big wet fart. A stinky, smelly, wet fart. And from what I've read from a few other things online, that their presentation got laughs backstage by other people in production and some of the other wrestlers. Chinhead's in here, so there should be no more Retribution. They got their asses beat after a DQ match. Yes. I know that won't be the case because they'll bring them back next week. They have a really big hole to get themselves out of right now. I don't see it happening unless they do a major overhaul next week. That's the only shot these guys have, okay? Is a major overhaul next week. Read the feedback, listen to the reviews, read the reviews. Don't be so stubborn. It's not too late to fix this, but it's going to take a lot of work. I have a pretty cool idea here. Being that the 5 core members of Retribution are all former members of NXT, they could have done this a lot better. They could have we're just going to pick up on everything that Retribution has done or said up until tonight's Monday Night Raw. Okay. Pre-reveal of the stupid names and the stupid masks. Now I'm going to fantasy book this from a fan's perspective here, okay? Let's start off with Dominik Dijakovic. Okay? We're going to keep first of all, we're going to keep these 5 under their regular names. We're going to stay Dominik Dijakovic. We're going to stay Mia Yim. We're going to stay Dia Madden. We're going to stay Shane Thorne. We're going to stay Mercedes Martinez. Okay? So let's start with Big T-Bar, with Dominik Dijakovic. Okay? He reveals himself as Dominik Dijakovic still. And he can talk about, how pissed off he is that Keith Lee got called up to the quote-unquote main roster, that he feels he got passed over. He can talk about all the wars and the great, amazing matches that the two of them had, and said that he deserved as much opportunity as Keith Lee did. And he feels like he got passed over, that he got overlooked for somebody else. He can even make someone, a flash in the pan, someone who's older. I mean, Keith Lee is a little older. He's in his late 30s. Dominik Dijakovic is a little younger. He could have played that into it. He's already been in this game for a while. Like, you need a young blood be called up. play that into it. So there's how Dominik Dijakovic could be introduced. Sticking with the Keith Lee theme here, let's jump right into Mia Yim. Okay. Now, for those of you unaware, Mia Yim is not only the on-screen girlfriend of Keith Lee, but the real-life girlfriend. They're a real couple on and off screen. Okay. So you can play Mia Yim kind of in a similar way that Dijakovic is playing here. That Lee got called up to NXT. She feels like she got left behind. He's not calling. He's not answering text. Something like that. She can play it like she feels that he's got a big head, that his ego is getting the best of him. She can say, that he didn't fight to bring me along with him up to Monday Night Raw. She feels betrayed. So now she's going to, destroy Monday Night Raw because she feels that Monday Night Raw went to Keith Lee's head and has changed him. Even though we may not see it in his character as he's been portrayed on Raw. But as, a real-life couple, she's going to see a different side of him that we don't get to see. So they could use that angle to why Mia Yim is in Retribution. Okay? Let's talk about Dio Madden. The gentleman now known as Mace. Okay. Now, Dio Madden I had to think about for a little bit. But then I came up with something really good because I remembered that Dio Madden was on the Raw commentary team about a year ago. If you remember, he was sticking up for the other commentators when Brock Lesnar attacked and gave him an F5 through a table. We haven't seen Dio Madden since. So you play that as the reason why he wants Retribution. Okay? He says that once he healed from the attack, he wasn't brought back to the commentary table, that they moved on without him, and that he feels like he wasn't given a proper chance to get his spot back. And he was basically all but forgotten for the last year. You turn these real-life situations into an angle because it works. And I think in this situation with Retribution for what they originally stood for, or what we thought they stood for, or what the perception that it was given to us what they stood for, I think that works really well for the three of them. Okay? Let's move on to Slapjack. Slapnuts. Shane Thorne. Okay? Shane Thorne is probably the most difficult one. I had to come up with an idea here for him. Okay? So Shane Thorne can talk about how he was always stuck in tag teams. He was signed to a tag team, TM61. He can talk about he was never given a chance to shine on his own, that he was always stuck being somebody's partner. He was never given an opportunity to be his own man, to grab that proverbial brass ring in solo action. Okay? Then, talk about how MVP tried to use him because Shane Thorne and Vic something, I can't remember the guy's name, I had it in my head earlier, but I can't remember it. They were on Raw back around April, and MVP was using them to do matches against Ricochet and Cedric Alexander. He could talk about how he was pretty much a pawn for MVP to try to go after Ricochet and Alexander because he couldn't get the job done himself. And that he feels like MVP just used him as a pawn to further his own game. Which would make sense now that Retribution is feuding with the Hurt Business. That's how you tie that all in together, okay? And then finally, let's get to Mercedes Martinez. I had to do a little research on this one. I had to dig a little bit to come up with a good idea for her introduction into Retribution. For those of you who don't know, Mercedes Martinez has been around for a long time. I think she first broke into the business in the mid to late 2000s. So she's been around for over 10 years. She has been around. She's worked the indies. She's been all over the world. She even made an appearance in AEW at the All Out Battle Royal last year. But for Mercedes Martinez, she can talk about how WWE refused to give her a chance for over a decade until she was finally brought in for the Mae Young Classic in 2017, where she won her first 3 matches before losing in the quarterfinals to the eventual winner, Shayna Baszler. So she gets this shot, she wins a few matches, she makes the quarterfinals, and then she loses. Then she's never heard from or seen again. Until earlier this year, they brought her back in, but put her in NXT. And she can kind of play like, someone of her qualifications with her experience. she shouldn't have to be around a bunch of quote rookies and quote trainees. Kind of play into that. Then because she was a part of the Robert Stone brand, she could say she even tried to align herself with Robert Stone to get noticed, only for them to drop her like a bad habit when she lost one match. When she lost that match to Rhea Ripley, Robert Stone announced she wouldn't be a part of the Robert Stone brand anymore, because obviously she was being pulled up for Raw, part of Retribution. So they can kind of play that into that angle, that, you know, she's been around forever. They gave her one chance. You know, she made it through this tournament pretty far, but then they just kind of dropped her. They didn't give her any other opportunities, only to bring her back 3 years later and put her around a bunch of rookies and, you know, performance center trainees. You know, she tries to get noticed, but they drop her because she lost one match. So that right there is how I would fantasy booked Retribution last night on Raw, as far as their introduction to Monday Night Raw. I think for all 5 of them, it makes a lot more sense. It's very believable. It's very realistic. It calls upon past storylines and real-life situations, which I think you have to pull from a lot of times to make a good and believable story. So that's my fantasy booking of Retribution from last night, at least as far as the introduction. As far as the match goes, I'd have had a win decisively. The Hurt Business has been very dominant. If you want Retribution to have any credibility whatsoever, they needed a definitive win. They did not get it. And then, obviously, I've talked ad nauseum about everything else that's gone on. The only other thing I didn't talk about while reviewing the rest of Raw, but let's talk about Raw Underground for a minute. I would like to know, what is the exact point of Raw Underground? It's obviously not to build new stars, because arguably the biggest star to possibly come out of Raw Underground in the last few weeks is Dabba-Kato. He's been beating up dudes left and right. Even Hua, you could even throw that in there. But last night on Raw Underground, Dabba-Kato gets knocked out by Braun Strowman in short fashion. Braun didn't need a win there. We all know who Braun is. Everybody watching Raw has seen Braun. They know Braun. Braun's a SmackDown wrestler. He showed up on Raw around the last 2 weeks, and he just kayfabe knocked out potentially the biggest new star that they were building out of Raw Underground. Because reasons. That's the only logical thing I can think of now. Because we know WWE will not give us any real explanation. They will not explain it. They will not say what the purpose of Raw Underground is. Even when we had Shane McMahon on the KO show, we're not getting anything. And I wouldn't hold your breath if you want some kind of explanation, because I honestly don't think it's coming any time soon. I have one topic that I really wanted to talk about, but I might have to do a separate show on this, or I'll just wait to talk about it next week. And that is, simply put, the WWE should concede this whole Wednesday Night War and move NXT off of Wednesday nights. The quick points I want to make, and I have all the numbers, but I don't want to go too long, is that when both shows were unopposed, they had better ratings. When NXT was on Tuesday nights, the numbers went up. When AEW was on Wednesdays unopposed, their numbers went up, even breaking 1 million for the first time in a year. The fans win in this because you're not dividing that audience on Wednesday nights. But I'll go a little more in depth either in a separate show or I'll talk about it next week. But let's wrap up with Clash of Champions, which is this coming Sunday, September 27th, from the Thunderdome in the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida. Now, we may get some more stuff on SmackDown this week. I'm not 100% sure, but as of right now, this recording, there are 9 matches announced. Let's run them down real quick. I'll predict who I think is going to win. As we know right now, the pre-show will have Asuka defending the Raw Women's Championship against Zelina Vega. Again, Zelina has done really nothing other than win one match in over a year to earn this title shot. So putting the belt on her would be absolutely ridiculous. So Asuka is going to retain here. In his 14th match with a member of the Hurt Business. That's right, 14 matches now as of this Sunday. And I won't play the song, but I'll save it because sure I'm going to need it next week. Bobby Lashley is defending the United States Championship against Apollo Crews. As much as I enjoyed Apollo as champ, I think the Hurt Business needs the win because they are also feuding with Retribution. Bobby Lashley will pick up the W here. And in the 8th match between these tag teams, we're going to get a Raw Tag Team Championship match. The Street Profits defending against Andrade and Angel Garza. I thought last week that Andrade and Garza were breaking up when Zelina Vega walked out on them, but apparently they are still a team. So I'm hoping that the Street Profits pick up this win here and once and for all put an end to Andrade and Angel Garza. Turn Angel Garza face. I think he'd be a pretty cool baby face. But the whole pants thing, I think it would be a good baby face thing to do. We got a triple threat match to determine an undisputed Intercontinental Champion over on SmackDown. We got Jeff Hardy, the recognized Intercontinental Champion, defending against self-proclaimed, never lost the belt Intercontinental Champion Sami Zayn, and also the phenomenal one AJ Styles. I think this match could potentially steal the show. I'd be okay with any of the three guys winning, to be perfectly honest. I think Jeff as IC champion is cool. I think AJ had a good run with the IC title. I thought Sammy had something going good before the pandemic broke and he decided to take time off and be with his family. But I think at the end of the night, Jeff Hardy is going to remain Intercontinental Champion. Okay. Let's talk about the SmackDown Tag Team Championship. We got Cesaro and Shinsuke Nakamura defending against the Lucha House Party. We don't know which two will be, Kalisto, Gran Metalik, or Lince Dorado. We'll get 2 of the 3 of those guys in this match. Now, last week on SmackDown, it seemed like there was a full breakup. Lince Dorado did post an image to his Instagram without his mask on, holding in his hand a shot from behind saying goodbye, one word, which has led to speculation that he could be leaving the company or potentially getting a gimmick change, maybe. Cesaro and Shinsuke are going to win here. I see the Lucha House Party exploding in one way, shape, or form. But Shinsuke and Cesaro are going to retain here. Sticking with tag team titles, let's talk about the Women's Tag Team Championships. You have Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler defending against the new Riot Squad, the team of Ruby Riott and Liv Morgan. I have a funny feeling they're going to put the belts on the Riot Squad. And there'll be a blow-up between Nia and Shayna, which will lead to a match, I'm guessing, at Survivor Series, which will be the next pay-per-view, I think. Yeah, Survivor Series will be the next pay-per-view. But I could also see Nia and Shayna retaining and moving up. But there's really not a lot of tag teams to face. I think if you put the belts on the Riot Squad, you could send them down to NXT. Sending Shayna as a tag champ to NXT, I don't think would do very well because she dominated the NXT brand for so long. There's no reason, even as a tag team champion with Nia Jax, there's no reason to have her go to NXT. But I don't think there's really anybody on Raw or SmackDown for them to face other than the Riot Squad, it seems right now. So I'm going to go with an upset and say the Riot Squad pick up the win here with a blow-up between Nia and Shayna, which will lead to a feud between them. Then for the SmackDown Women's Championship, we have Bayley defending against Nikki Cross. I have a feeling that possibly Sasha Banks and or Alexa Bliss could get involved in this match in some way, shape, or form. But ultimately, they're not going to put the belt on Nikki. The only person that's going to take that belt off of Bayley will be Sasha Banks at some point whenever that match comes. So Bayley will retain. And let's talk about the 2 big boy belts. Let's stay on the SmackDown brand. Roman Reigns defending the Blue Universal title against his cousin Jey Uso. I expect this to be a really good match. Roman has hinted that he will be getting new wrestling attire. He'll be staying with the black pants but no shirt. And potentially even new music as well this Sunday. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, Roman's going to retain here. And then they'll probably move him on to something else. But heel Roman has been really good. I know I haven't talked about it a lot here on the podcast. So hopefully one of these weeks I'll get to catch up to see what everybody thinks of heel Roman so far. And finally, what I am going to guess will main event Clash of Champions this Sunday. It is a medical facility transport, or as WWE is calling it, an ambulance match for the WWE Championship. Drew McIntyre defending against Randy Orton. Randy is seeking to become a 14-time WWE Champion. Unfortunately for Drew, his crowning achievement, beating Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, came in an empty arena, and there have been no fans during his entire title reign. It is no fault of Drew whatsoever. So I hope that at some point in his future, he does get another opportunity to carry the company on his back as WWE Champion. Now, if you believe some of the rumor and innuendo out on the internets, WWE is apparently penciled in Randy Orton versus Edge in a rubber match at WrestleMania 37 next year, and potentially could have this be for a championship, or in this case the WWE Championship. So let's just say, for example, Randy Orton wins the title here, he carries it to WrestleMania, Edge returns, potentially wins the Royal Rumble, and if not the Royal Rumble and a SmackDown star wins the Royal Rumble, then I would guess he would win an Elimination Chamber match to get a shot at Randy Orton. Or they could just have this blow-off match, be at Royal Rumble this year, and then have the winner go on to face somebody at WrestleMania. I'm not quite ready for Drew McIntyre's reign to end. I think he has been the underdog for the majority. They've booked Randy Orton really strong over Drew McIntyre for the last several weeks, which could either be setting up Randy to pick up the win and go on and carry the belt strongly until dropping it to presumably Edge, whether it be Royal Rumble or WrestleMania. Or it's the age-old, whoever has the upper hand going into the pay-per-view will lose. Go back in time. If you have the upper hand going into a pay-per-view, there's a higher shot that you're going to lose. That's just the way WWE has booked it. And we're going to go off of that logic. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Drew McIntyre retains and keeps the WWE Championship against Randy Orton. And again, that is Clash of Champions this coming Sunday, the September the 27th, live on the WWE Network. So if you're listening to this, that is the one thing I'm asking. I don't ask a lot, but I'm asking. If you're hearing this, if you're seeing my beautiful face, if you're listening to my wonderful voice, head over to YouTube, search Wrestling with Fans Podcast, click that subscribe button. That is what I'm on. That is what I'm challenging the audience this week. That's going to wrap it up, ladies and gents. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. I will see you all next week. Next week, right here on Wrestling with Fans.